Spurgeon here with RevZilla, and today we're going to discuss modifications you can make to your adventure motorcycle to make it more off-road capable. So finally, a video that I can sink my teeth into, riding larger adventure bikes off-road. Now, the first thing that comes to mind are all the people out there that are going to ask the question, why would you want to take such a large, heavy motorcycle off-road? Yes, this is going to be larger and heavier than your average dual sport motorcycle, but it's going to be much more competent on the street, and it's going to be much more capable off-road than your average street bike. So what you get is a bike that's going to give you comfort over long distances while still giving you the ability to tackle nearly any environment out there. So we decided to go with the BMW R1200 GS for this video. And we had a couple of reasons for this. One, it's the granddaddy of adventure bikes. This is the bike that everybody thinks of when you think of adventure riding. It's simply synonymous with that world. And this is going to be a bike that's going to have a huge aftermarket following. This is a bike that's going to have a ton of parts for it. And as we got it from BMW, it's pretty much bone stock as it sits right now. It's a clean slate, if you will. But keep in mind, regardless of whether you have a GS in the garage, a KLR 650, or a KTM 1190 Adventure R, everything we're going to discuss in this video today applies regardless of what adventure bike you're actually using. We're going to focus on three main areas. We're going to talk about protection first, because most of these bikes are going to come with inadequate protection from the factory, and it's not so much about keeping the bike looking nice and new, it's about making sure that if you have a crash out in the middle of nowhere, you can get the bike back to civilization. The second area we're going to talk about is going to be storage for these bikes, because while those giant, shiny aluminum panniers look awesome, they're probably not the most appropriate choice for those of you really looking at tackling hardcore off-road riding. And lastly, we're going to talk about tires, because all of these bikes are going to come primarily with tires geared for street riding, and we need better grip and better performance off-road. So we're going to break down the selections that you'd want to consider if you're really going to challenge yourself off-road with a larger adventure bike. And then throughout the entire video, we're going to also sprinkle in tips and tricks. These are going to be relatively free things that you can do to your motorcycle to better fit it for your size as well as your riding style to give you best comfort off-road. And if you're watching this video and you're thinking, Spurge, I don't ever plan on riding my large adventure bike off-road, that's okay. We're going to have a video for you too, which is going to be focused on better outfitting your adventure bike for touring riding. But regardless of what video you're looking for, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube so you can keep up with all the content we have rolling out, from modification videos to first ride reviews to product reviews. We've got a ton of content here at RevZilla.com, and we don't want you to miss any of it. Now, without any further ado, let's start modifying this GS. So first up, we're going to talk about bike protection. And that's because if you're riding these big bikes off-road, you need to make sure you can get back to where you're coming from. Like I said in the beginning of the video, this really isn't about keeping the bike looking nice and new, but key elements of protection that are going to make sure that the bike stays in one piece, at least enough to the point where you can limp it back to where you started your ride. Now, starting off, we're going to talk about the crash protection you see right here, and we went with AltRider. Now, we went with AltRider because, frankly, I like AltRider. It's made in the USA, it's well engineered, and what's really cool is that this is all going to be done in stainless steel. So if you're like myself and you're crashing a lot off-road, once you wear this fancy powder coated finish off, underneath that stainless steel isn't going to rust. Now, the other cool thing here is that this is going to work very nicely with the AltRider skid plate. Keep in mind that regardless of which crash bar setup you go with, and there's a ton of crash bars out there, you want to make sure you run the same crash bars as you do skid plate. And the reason is you can run into some compatibility issues if you're trying to mix and match crash bars and skid plates. Because of that, we went with an AltRider skid plate. Now, when you're looking at the skid plate that comes stock from the manufacturer, sometimes it can be deceiving. When I did that review of the Tiger XCX, one of the things that I actually complimented Triumph on was the beefiness of their skid plate. And the reality of it, once I took one major off-road hit, bent the skid plate right in half. So even though some of those OEM skid plates look like they're robust, really, getting an aftermarket skid plate is going to be the way to go. What I like about the AltRider one, it's done with TIG welds throughout the aluminum, and what's great about that is they don't utilize rivets to hold the different bends together, and then you're going to get maximum coverage over the stock option. So it's just a big, beefy design that's going to be able to handle all the rigors of riding this thing off-road. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the radiator protection. the most susceptible area to a bike is going to be the radiator. It's right out in front, and it's extremely vulnerable to impact. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've been in an off-road situation where one tiny little stick or rock took down a giant adventure bike. So you want to make sure you're protecting the radiator on a motorcycle, or maybe you have an older GS that's not water-cooled. You want to make sure you're protecting your oil cooler up front as well. So for this video, we went with RNG radiator guards up front. Super lightweight, doesn't impede airflow to the radiator itself, and it sits about 1/4 inch away from the radiator, so any impact that does go through it absorbs it without allowing that impact to transfer into the radiator, damaging the aluminum and then dumping your coolant all over the ground. So whichever brand you want to go with, there are a wide variety of options out there. You just want to make sure you're putting some kind of protection over your radiator. Now last but not least, handguards. You can walk into pretty much any dealership in the country that sells adventure bikes, and every adventure bike is going to have giant plastic handguards on there. The problem here is that if you actually go down in an off-road situation, they're usually going to bend or shift, and you're going to damage the levers underneath. So what we did, we went with Barkbusters handguards, and the reason we did that, it's not so much the plastics, but it's this giant aluminum backbone that sits underneath the actual plastics itself, which is going to protect your levers. Remember, if you're out there and you lose a clutch lever or a brake lever, it becomes very difficult to get the bike back in one piece. So the aluminum backbone is less about keeping your hands safe and more about keeping the levers behind it safe. The other reason we went with Barkbusters is that there's a wide variety of fitments, so they're going to work for pretty much every adventure bike out there, and you have some different plastic options. In the summer months, you can take the plastics off and just run with the aluminum backbone, which is going to give you maximum airflow to your hands. Or in the colder months, or if you're riding in the rain, you can go with something like the Storm plastics, which will give you maximum protection from the elements. And then you can go maybe somewhere in the middle, maybe like the Goldilocks, which would be the VPS. And the VPS stands for Variable Position System, and that allows you to change exactly what amount of plastics are working to deflect the elements from your hand. Now, there's a ton of other protection you can add to your motorcycle. You could look at headlight guards, you could have header guards. There's a ton of stuff out there, but if you're really starting off in the world of adventure, these are the main 4 areas that you want to focus on. Now, with that being said, let's talk about luggage. Now, the one thing that's pretty much universal across the board is that regardless of what adventure bike you have, chances are the OEM toolkit is going to be a pile of garbage. So before you ever really start modifying your motorcycle, the first thing you want to do is simply beef up the toolkit that you're going to carry with you, because that's really your only means of fixing the bike when you're out in the trail. Make sure that you're going to have the bare necessities, things to change the tires, adjust the handlebars, and then make simple fixes when you're out there, and practice using that toolkit in the comfort of your own garage before you ever have to try using it hundreds of miles away from anywhere else. Now, when you're storing these things on the bike, there's some simple tricks you can use. One of Lemmy's favorite tips is to use a simple welding rod container to carry tools. This gives you a lightweight storage container that's going to also be waterproof, and you can pretty much mount it anywhere on your bike. One of the things that I like to do if I'm traveling extremely light is I'll simply just zip tie a tire iron to the frame rail on either side of my Tiger, which saves room for storage for all the luggage I'm going to have on the bike. So you may have noticed a complete lack of hard luggage on this motorcycle, and that's because a few years ago, hard luggage might have been the best way for you to carry a ton of gear with you down the road on your bike. But that's not the case anymore. We've seen a lot of sophisticated dry bags hit the market, and really when you're looking at riding a bike off-road, these give you so many more advantages over hard bags. You're looking at less weight, less cost, something that's gonna be more durable, and it's gonna give you more modularity for adding a ton of storage to this than a regular hard bag would give you. So for this setup, we went with the new Kriega Overlander bags, and really what you're getting here is a sophisticated dry bag that hard mounts to the motorcycle itself, and it also gives you a lot of modulation for adding additional storage to this. When we compare this to the stock hard luggage from BMW, we save like 20 pounds. It's a couple $100 less expensive than the BMW, and our storage capabilities are through the roof. This still isn't a cheap option. When you're looking at the racks, the mounting plates, and the bags themselves, you're coming in around the $1,100 mark. If you want something a little bit simpler, check out the Enduristan Monsoon 3s. That's another bag that I use that I really like. It just mounts a little bit easier. It's not quite as sophisticated, and it's not going to give you quite the modular option that the Kriega is, but it's going to save you a couple $100 over what the Kriega is going to offer you. Now, regardless of which dry bag setup you go with, we talk about the durability of these bags. If you were to crash off-road with hard luggage, chances are you're not getting it back on if you damage it, where with dry bags, you simply strap them on down. Now, we had to figure out a way to mount Drybags to the top instead of using a traditional top box with this. So we went with an AltRider luggage rack, and we went with this for a variety of different reasons. One, there's a ton of different tie-down points to lash things to. Two, you're going to be able to mount a Rotopacks to this if you want to. So if you are riding off-road and you want to carry extra fuel or extra water, that's going to mount very easily to the top of this. And the other option is, if you're using your bike on-road and off-road and you want the availability to actually mount hard luggage to this, AltRider is going to give you a GV adapter kit so you can actually mount a top box to this if you're riding on road. But again, we're focusing on off-road here, so we're going to utilize a Drybag as our top box as opposed to traditional hard luggage. And again, same rules apply. This is going to be lightweight and more durable than what we're getting with a standard hard bag, and we're going to go with Giant Loop on this. We're going with Giant Loop simply because I use Giant Loop products on my motorcycle, and this stuff is super durable. I've gone across Canada, I've gone across Mexico, across the US, and this stuff holds up. And we're going to mount it using ROK Straps. Now, if you're not familiar with ROK Straps, this is pretty much the one piece of gear that Lemmy and I can continually agree on. We both have quite a few sets of these in our garage because they work and they're simple and they're definitely more effective than a traditional bungee strap. There's still elastication in here, and again, with all those different points to mount from, on the AltRider luggage rack to that, we're simply going to go through the top loops on this. We're going to cinch these down, and it holds into place nicely, while if you do have a spill off-road, there's enough flex that the bag is going to just kind of move with the bike as opposed to kind of rip off the bike, which is one of the fail points that you'd see with hard luggage. Now, there's plenty of different flavors of dry bags out there. We went with Giant Loop because it's just one of our favorites, but there's so many different options for you to choose from. Now, the one piece of luggage you might notice that is missing from this motorcycle is a tank bag. And while I'm normally a huge fan of tank bags, I find that when I'm riding off-road, they usually interfere with my manly bits, and I'm not looking to do that when I'm standing up and riding around off-road. So we're gonna save the tank bag for the companion video piece where we're talking about converting your ADV machine into a long road touring bike. So with that being said, we got one last segment to tackle. Let's get into tires. So remember, this video is not just about outfitting your motorcycle, but it's about fine-tuning the ergonomics of your motorcycle to best work with your body type. And the first thing that I did here was that I actually tilted the handlebars forward. What this does, it allows for an easier reach to my controls when I'm in the standing position, and you're gonna find that it's a lot easier to shift and then utilize that brake. Now, the other thing this does, it gives me a bit of a rise. So for most of you riders out there, it'll eliminate the need for bar risers on your handlebars. Now, if you're tall like me at 6'3", I'd probably go with some kind of a riser setup still. Now, the other thing I've done here is I've made little notches on my handlebar setup so I can easily see where I was in the seated position and then the standing position so I can move those handlebars back and forth. And I've also gone ahead and removed my mirrors. Now, if you're planning on using your motorcycle on and off-road, you might want to come up with a different solution, but for me, when I get off-road, I pull the mirrors off and it allows me to go full tilt with the handlebars without having to worry about smashing into the windshield. Now, the same way you make the adjustments to the handlebars, you want to make adjustments to your foot controls so you have better control with your feet. Remember, when you're riding off-road and you're standing, using your weight and leveraging it back and forth in those feet is really how you're going to steer the machine, but you also need to be able to shift. So that shift lever on most bikes is going to be adjustable. You can raise it about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and by doing so, you're going to get a more positive feel for getting that big, bulky ADV boot underneath the shift lever, and you're going to start to realize exactly how easy it is to shift while you're in the standing position. Now, I've also gone ahead and I've removed those rubber inserts from the foot pegs, so I have a lot more traction when I'm standing up. Now, over on the right side, while there's no real adjustments for most of the brake levers out there, AltRider has come up with this ingenious, tiny little product which mounts on top of your brake pedal, and that's going to allow you to get a really positive feel to the brake pedal when you're in the standing position as well as the seated position. And remember, that rear brake is extremely important when you're riding off-road. So last but not least, traction and performance. The easiest way to gain traction and performance on a larger adventure motorcycle is to swap out the tires, because most of these bikes are going to come outfitted with street-oriented rubber. Now, this is probably one of the biggest gripes that I have with tire manufacturers. They try to sell you on a variety of different flavors of tires. Would you like an 80/20 with that, sir? Perhaps a 90/10? It's all BS. Really, what you're looking at are 3 different types of tires. You got on-road tires. Those are going to be your 80/20s, your 90/10s, your 95/5s, whatever the hell that is. And then you're going to have your 50/50 tires. 50/50 tires blends the performance you'd expect from a street tire with the prowess you're looking for off-road. So what you get is a combination tire that's going to give you, considerably decent mileage, but it's also going to handle okay on the street as well as off-road. And that's going to be your Heidenau K60 Scout, your Mitas E07. And for 50/50s and street tires, we're going to save those for the adventure touring video that we're going to do to supplement this adventure off-road video. But because this is really modifying your adventure bike for riding off-road, we're going to focus on off-road oriented tires, and that's your third category. Now, in off-road tires, you're looking at tires like TKC 80s from Continental. You're looking at Mitas E09s, your Kenda Big Blocks. What you're getting with an off-road oriented tire is a tire that's going to really dig in off-road, but you are going to sacrifice street performance as well as street longevity. What that means is you're probably only looking at getting about 2,000 to 2,500 miles out of a rear, but what you're going to gain is maximum traction when you're riding off-road. Now, for this bike, we went with the TKC 80s from Continental, and we did that because TKC 80s have a wide variety of fitment. They're going to work for 19s, 21s, even 17-inch fronts, and then you're going to have a wide variety of fitments for the rears as well, and that's going to work for our BMW because we've got mag wheels on this. Now, for adventure bikes, there's a ton of different options out there for wheels. You could look at the mag wheels. You're going to have cross-spoke wheels from BMW, which are actually a bit better oriented for off-road riding. And then you can have traditional spoke wheels, which would utilize a tube on the inside. But with TKC 80s, out of all the tires we looked at, these are the ones that are going to fit the widest available range of adventure motorcycles. Now, we have more to talk about with tires, but let's go outside to do so. So if you're not keen on the idea of replacing your brand new tires, one of the easiest ways you can gain a little bit of traction back is by lowering your tire pressure. Now, every bike's gonna be a little bit different, but a good rule of thumb is somewhere right around 10 PSI per tire. I like to start off right around 26 in the front, 28 in the rear, and that should be a good starting point for you. Just keep in mind, when you're running a lower tire pressure, you're gonna run the risk of damaging your rims, as well as possibly even cracking a mag wheel. It's a good tip to keep a spare set of tubes with you, even if you're running mag wheels out in the field, because this can help you if you're having trouble resetting a bead on the tire, or maybe you've really bent that mag wheel out of whack. This is going to allow you to keep tire pressure in your tire and get you back to where you need to be. Now, you don't have to carry 2 spare tubes with you. Just using the tube for the front, you'll be able to use in the back in a pinch. Now, in order to get that tire pressure back up to snuff, you're going to have to carry something with you that's going to allow you to reinflate. You can either go with an electric pump, or you can just go with a simple CO2 cartridge, and make sure you have a tire pressure gauge and then, of course, spare tire irons with you when you're out there in the middle of nowhere. Now, if you've liked the tips and tricks that you've seen in this video, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube so you can keep up with all the video content we're rolling out at RevZilla.com. From videos like this one where we show you how to modify your bike to first ride reviews and product reviews, we've got a ton of content for you at RevZilla. So that about wraps up the major modifications you're going to want to tackle before starting out an adventure off-road with your larger ADV bike. But just keep in mind, this is just really the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different modifications you can make based on the type of adventure that you're having. But really, at this point in the journey, all you need to do now is click the info button on your desktop or mobile device, which will allow you to plug your bike's information in to our bike finder, and you can see all the different modifications that are available for your specific machine. Now, in addition to that, you can watch detailed product videos on anything you've seen here. And if you want to flush out some ideas on how to best modify your bike with one of our gear geeks, just give them a shout, 877-792-9455, or simply shoot over an email to cs@RevZilla.com. Now, thank you for joining us for this look at how to best modify your ADV bike for off-road use. I'm Spurge. Enjoy the ride.